Hi, it's a pleasure to me to be able to be with you today. I am Raul Lozano and I'm in charge of working with small and medium-sized companies in Latin America today. Will be a pleasure to discuss what we have in Amazon Web Services to help small and medium-sized companies to use the cloud in order to become more competitive and more productive in order to face the environment we live in. I hope the information of today's will be of your benefit. I would like to start talking about the study of the company IDC. That is a company that studies the marketplace. They detected the inflection points faced in these last years by the companies, and this took the companies to change and to focus differently their business. First, we have economical impact very deep, clearly, and now with the end of the pandemic.
A deep impact, which on the one hand led to a connectivity in the companies so they can maintain their work. Also in the companies with an IT infrastructure that was pre-existing and they had a potential risk of not supporting the business objectives. And also this also led to a forced digitalization process, oftentimes with many accidents in the business operations. So what happened for the companies? This led, first of all, to modernize themselves. And for what purpose? For maintaining their business efficiently working. That was the number one priority. How can I maintain? And how can I maintain my business? And secondly, not less importantly, we had many new possibilities of reinventing ourselves, not only to survive, but also to build a sustainable business in the course of time, which now with the new ways of working that we can see, the new ways of interacting, and the challenges that we have from the standpoint of supply chains, the companies have to reinvent themselves and see how they built this business to sustain itself in time, and finally transforming in such a way that they can find opportunities that did not exist previously or that do not exist currently. And we see increasingly how the companies do not depend anymore on a geographic situation to be competitive. Those who can transform themselves digitally and have a competitive supply on a worldwide basis can compete anywhere in the world. And this has to do with the transformation and must be enabled by a series of competencies that are necessary for this type of work. Which are the entrepreneurial challenges that we have 1749 small and medium companies? Which were the main challenges that you have found? It was a survey. First of all, to grow. What do I have to do so my business can continue growing and continue being competitive? And this has a lot to do with how to obtain new customers in a productive way, always optimizing costs. Because in this increasingly competitive world, those who cannot optimize their costs can easily be off the market. Now, inside this, with these surveys and studies I am mentioning, we see 67% of the business leaders, they believe that the need to be significantly more digital to continue being competitive. And this brings us to how these business can become more competitive. These are the modern and high-speed business, which become increasingly necessary to propel them in this digital world so we can become not only competitive, but also relevant in the market. To maintain competitiveness and relevance and to increase the growth of any business, it's really important to focus on the necessary capacities which must be developed from a standpoint of the digital world. So we begin with the insights or with the knowledge of the market which each company has. This becomes possible, makes possible that the companies seek changes led by the business, seeking to improve their attention to the customers. It's always important never to miss the customer from view, which is so important for the companies. And to attain these goals in many occasions, we see the need for a digital innovation, which many times are not so ready. And this brings us to the importance of modernizing and migrating from the mindsets, between mindsets to support this process. And the cloud services provide several tools that allow us to produce additional, create more value for our customers. And finally, the feedback with the insights of these customers, we create this virtuous circle that accelerates the digital transformation and makes the company more productive, competitive, and more digitally able. And the reality we find is that approximately 2/3 of the IT resources are consumed only to maintain the operations working as we are doing now. All this we're already investing many resources, and these costs, they're assumed as at the zero value. And that's where it's really important to consider this theme of digital transformation. And which are the features of a modern digital network, modern digital business? As I've said, number one, obsessed with the customer. The digital processes are 100% centered on the customer. But to do it, they need to be organized in such a way and to add value. It's really important to produce a learning and teaching culture. And this we learn with the operations and the experience with the clouds, the opportunity of testing and learning. Fourth, centering on technology as a nucleus in order to use the technology as an enabler of businesses. And finally, increasingly more important, how the data increasingly are more relevant and valuable. So we have to have a data strategy to help these data to produce feedback and produce the correct information that we need for our business. Now, we always have this tension between the need for change and the fear of change on the other hand. But I'd like to comment, there are many companies in Latin America, and here are just a few of them that have been working with us from all sizes, that are transforming themselves digitally and which have taken the time to find how to add value to for all types of fields of medicine, cars, different types of companies and services that have been able to transform themselves to really become effectively more competitive. I'd like also to comment with you. We must be careful with which are these common problems that appear when the companies begin to modernize. A first failure that we see is when you see, instead of harnessing the advantages and moving to the clouds and optimizing the processes, we see people taking the same process in a monolithic way and missing many of the advantages. Those monoliths usually generate more challenges in the solution of problems and typically overload the information and the operations. The exercise of modernizing, this is not only a technological theme, but also it is really important to deal with cultural and organizational themes that sometimes are left aside. When the practices are not aligned with the culture, we see, for instance, big teams without a clear objective. And another failure of is that sometimes we have genius products, um, but aren't have products but are disconnected from the customers. So it's important to ensure the connection between the teams and the customers. The third failure that's very common is when the organization strives for innovation as part of its work, but only has one person or a small team in charge of innovating internally, when this exercise should be carried out in all over the company and everybody should have been involved with innovation. So it happens that this small innovation team are sometimes have faced many organizational dramas because they're not aligned with the previous businesses. And finally, the challenge or failure in terms of transformation when the innovation plans produce results after a large product instead of seeking a succession of small successes. And this allows them, the cloud technologies allows them to do it, the interactions and gradually adding value without an expectation, but producing ideas that can be fulfilled. And this is often because people propose too ambitious objectives or they do not understand the objectives and take time to obtain their resources. So bearing that in mind, we at Amazon Web Services have a framework which we call the well-architected framework, which encompasses these 6 pillars which help the companies to tread this path of digital innovation. This framework is used by our teams and business partners to help you with the architectures and cloud innovations and how they behave in the course of time. It highlights each pillar has a specific focus. The first one of operational excellence is concentrating in executing and monitoring systems and constantly improving processes and procedures. Among the key themes, we include automation of changes, answer to events, and standards to manage the daily operations. The second pillar, which is really important, is safety or security, that is protecting information and systems. Among the key themes, we have confidentiality and integrity of data, the management of user permissions, and controls to detect security threats. We clearly cannot take a digital transformation step without bearing in mind security. Equally important is the pillar of reliability centered on the workloads for the expected functions and how to recover quickly from failures, from mistakes. Among the key themes, we have the design of distributed services, the planning of recovery, and how to adapt to the changing business requirements. The fifth pillar, fourth one, efficacy of performance on information and the computing resources, including the selection of the types and sizes of resources, optimizes for the prerequisites of the workload, the monitoring of performance, and maintaining efficacy while the company's needs move forward. We also have the optimization of costs, which avoids unnecessary costs. And this is one of the key things about the clouds. Among the key issues, we see the compression of dedicated time and the assignment of funds for the types and the quantity of resources, how to scale up to comply with the company's needs without excessive costs. And finally, sustainability, the pillar that's centered on the environmental impacts of the cloud work, including the shared responsibility model for sustainability, the compression and decrease of the impact and maximization of the use to maximize the resources and decrease subsequent impacts. With this framework that we have, the companies can ensure that they will have a transition, a reliable, safe transition to the cloud format in optimizing the costs and in a sustainable way. Now, to conclude, I'd like to leave some links to you with the following suggested steps, next steps. And here you can go directly using the QR codes and using the links where you can have direct access. And I'd like to share with you these 3 resources. First, you can have access to the AWS Intelligent Businesses, where we have many elements, successful cases, and roles that you can, and papers that you can read to advance more in this digital transformation. We also have a second web link where you can have a self-evaluation through what we can see. The AWS Cloud Adoption Readiness Tool, a self-evaluation, so you can see how ready your company is and which steps you have to take to be able to transform them digitally through the cloud. And finally, if you have any project and you'd like to communicate directly with us through chat or any other contact way, you can also use the third link and become directly in contact with us. Well, with no further ado, I'd like to thank you for this invitation and for the time that you're dedicating to it. And here you see my contact information. I hope this small presentation can inspire and help us with the digital transformation that can effectively help move into the cloud, and so we can become more productive, more competitive, and be able to support more the nations where we are working respectively. Thank you very much.
Apologies, I just realized I was on mute. Raul, thank you so much for your presentation. It was great to hear more about the work that you're doing. And for the audience, now is the time to clarify any doubts that you may have. So if you have any additional questions, feel free to leave them in the chat so Raul can answer them. With that, we'll turn to our Q&A. And we do have a comment that I want to share, actually. And it says, it is so nice to see a sustainability pillar. The digitalization and the increase in the usage of technologies are surely as increasing the CO2 emissions. It would be important to have permanent emissions measure and reduction practices. So just wanted to share that with you. Everyone, if you have questions, please share.
And I see a question here. I will make it in Spanish and I will respond in Spanish since it's made in Spanish. Dice, la transformación digital lleva
The digital transformation takes a certain time because companies sometimes do not trust in the transformation. I believe this is a fundamental point. I believe, as you said, as I said in the previous conversation, a lot has to do with the fears that are myths that we see around what is the digital transformation and what it enables the digital transformation. Many companies believe that there is an excessive cost or they're afraid of security threats, but I'd say the main thing is how to make the switch and say, well, now I'm digitally transformed and tomorrow, and then they didn't like it, and they'll look for complex projects instead of walking in a stepwise way with the more immediate demands and taking new steps that can bring about our reliability and the fulfillment of the goals and doing it in an interactive way. The great advantage that we see in all the cloud elements is that they allow this stepwise transformation, and you don't need to, well, I have to pay and erase a big thing and start again. But what it could be something that what adds more value to my customers, and what can we focus on this, and then gradually develop things. And I believe that activities such as the one we are now conducting with these types of training work, and it is fundamental to have all this process. So I believe that so I'm really thankful for all who are participating here today, because it's part of how we can accelerate this digital transformation, which will make us more productive in all of our organizations.
Raul, thank you so much for your response to that question. I'm looking through the chat to see if there are any others that I might have missed.
Sí, y probablemente en lo que llegan más preguntas.
And probably while we wait for more questions about the theme of sustainability. And thank you, Gonzalo, for your question. Definitely, I believe that we have to be increasingly aware and precisely how we can, each one of us, support the sustainability, because it is something that our digital transformation also implies costs for the environment. So it's important that we are seeking as cloud systems where we optimize the use of the resources, and we have maybe hundreds and thousands of companies and which working with the servers. So we see how to make it more efficient, including in AWS case, to see, so we can measure which is our footprint of carbon, and also in terms of compliance with some of the countries these companies are facing. It will be able to measure and find the measures to decrease the footprint. I see a question of how much will be the initial cost by Karina Leon, and the idea, it's actually difficult to say it because it depends on things that can begin practically with zero cost until important and large projects by the large banks which have decided to carry out a complete transformation. So the big impact that we have here of moving towards the clouds, it has to do with saying that it's only paid for what it uses. So instead of being able to say of let's invest in a big server, and maybe we can start developing sometimes simple things. I need, for instance, a system to customer service centers, or where I can store our calls. For instance, a place where I connect my phone, and how can I transcribe certain calls? And you only pay for the moment when you use it. So it's variable, but it can be adapted and customized to the needs and the uses of each company. And the next question is this, Rosita Savalo. Each business can be in the cloud too? Yes, definitely. The cloud, and now we see them, now with the pandemic, we can see how the acceleration of the digital transformation, and we see in some countries, people who prefer before to commit of visiting a property, I'd like to see the virtual video of how the work is being conducted there, or the activity I'm interested in, including some cases. I was reading a couple of weeks ago an article saying that in Europe, properties that everything happens through the digital way. So for you, Rosita, and for any company to say, and if we don't begin to see which are these options and how they can, through the clouds, transform digitally, because we have, for instance, a real estate business. It's sometimes can have a lot more data and leverage these data to subsidize the customers. It's going to be more productive. So definitely the real estate businesses are using these technologies too, definitely.